Good morning, dear viewers. We are almost about to start the TIMOCOM live talk. Today we have a very exciting topic for you, the blockchain technology. We have a genuine blockchain expert to take you on a tour around the blockchain. And during the live talk, feel free to ask any questions you may have via Facebook. And yes, we will try to answer all of them. See you in a second. Welcome to the TIMOCOM live talk. And welcome to our guest, Sidsel Rytter Løschenkohl. You are our blockchain expert today, and we are very happy to have you today. First of all, you've come a long way to enter the blockchain world, so to speak. Could you tell a bit about how did you end up here? What was your career? And a bit about your background.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be joining you here at TIMOCOM in Erkrath.
Yes.
I'm sorry if I offended any German-speaking people here. So basically, blockchain expert. It's maybe a little bit making me blush over here, but I'm definitely very interested in the field, and I've been working specifically with blockchain for the past years. So basically, I guess my own interest in blockchain came back in 2015 when it was still pretty new. I was working for a major bank in Denmark, and I was doing some research into new technologies, and I came across blockchain, and I was like, it's going to change the world. So I just gradually made it a bigger part of my career, and then about a year and a half ago, I joined the Deloitte EMEA blockchain lab in Dublin. So the Deloitte has 3 global blockchain hubs where all the blockchain efforts are kind of centered around. So I joined the blockchain lab, and I've been working there for a year and a half until a few weeks ago as a blockchain consultant.
Okay.
And I guess like the tagline of what we do is that as a blockchain consultant, your role is to educate and to help clients understand blockchain, and also help them capture value with the technology and actually deliver platforms of blockchain.
Oh, wow, very impressive. One thing or two things you left out, I know you're a bit humble, but actually one of the Danish leading newspapers this year, I think in the spring, mentioned you as one of the top 100 talents. Can you tell us a bit about that? I think that's very exciting as well.
So yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm probably just loud, and that's how I got on the list. But the Danish financial newspaper Berlingske Tidende, every year they do a list of 100 people that they have identified as promising within business, and somehow my name made it on that list. But
very impressive, yeah. And I think it's very exciting to then also have you here today as one of the part of the top 100 talents. Also, I know that you've been to the Silicon Valley and worked there for a while. I think that's also very exciting. Silicon Valley is a word, well, it's like it pops up everywhere. So also tell a bit about that. What did you do there?
So definitely. So actually, like when I got into blockchain working for a Danish bank, I decided to do an internship in Silicon Valley for a while to really be close to where everything was happening. Silicon Valley is always like a few years ahead of what's happening in most of mainland Europe. So I worked there for 6 months' time, where I worked for the Danish government in a kind of consultancy role as well, where I work with both startups and bigger corporations. On the startup side, we help startups connect to the ecosystem in Silicon Valley to get funding, and to get advisors, and to learn what's going on there, basically. And then on the corporate side, I also help some major Danish companies connect with some of the newest leading technologies and startups in order to get that kind of knowledge flow and synergies between the industries.
Okay, very exciting. Yeah, but now we're here to talk about the blockchain and your passion. Try to explain to us in a very simple way, what is the blockchain technology? I, for one, am not really a tech person. Yeah, maybe explain it to us like you would perhaps explain your grandparents or someone like this.
Definitely. It's definitely a question I've gotten before, and I'd be happy to answer it. So I think something that I've noticed when I am somewhere speaking about blockchain, people generally either have no clue of what it is, or they think it just automatically equals Bitcoin. And this is probably because in 2017, I don't know if you're aware, but the price of Bitcoin rose rapidly, and everyone was like just buying Bitcoin and talking about how this was the new thing. So there's definitely like a gold rush for a while. That went down again, but a lot of people became familiar with Bitcoin that way. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think that's a good way of starting the conversation around what blockchain is. So basically, for those that don't know, Bitcoin is a technology that was invented in 2009 by an anonymous guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, and it's designed to kind of to do online transactions without using banks as intermediary. Mm-hmm. And it does so by using like a peer-to-peer network. So the Bitcoin network itself is a peer-to-peer public open network. And I understand from a company perspective and from a government perspective that this whole notion of public open is a bit scary. And that's why I really try to stress when I'm talking to companies that blockchain does not have to equal Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin is a blockchain technology. It uses it's the underpinning technology, but you can also do blockchain without doing Bitcoin. So they're different kind of blockchains. Mm-hmm. So going back to what is blockchain, I think the easiest explanation is to think of blockchain as a platform. So a blockchain is it's a platform in a technological sense is a base upon where you can exchange value. That could be money, it can be assets, it can be ownership or any kind of value or communication. So think of blockchain as that underpinning technology enabling the exchange of value.
I see.
And sorry to interrupt you. I guess the difference between the stage going, what you can do as blockchain is that you can cut out some level of intermediaries because it's peer-to-peer and it allows those actors to talk to each other.
Okay, I understand. I think it was very simple explained. I hope everybody out there as well have understood it. At least I know a lot more about the blockchain. Sidsel, another question. Blockchain until now has been more common in industries like telecommunications, cryptocurrency of course, fintech. But what about the transport industry, the logistics industry? I have not seen so many use cases where blockchain has been implemented. What are your thoughts about this use?
Yeah, so especially coming from the financial sector industry, I think it's important to draw some parallels. So what has happened in the financial sector was that, first of all, the first application of blockchain was the Bitcoin. That's a financial transaction. So I think that, of course, piqued some banks' interest into this technology. And also the financial sector has just been really struggling the past decade following the financial crisis. They struggle with trust. They struggle with a lot of money laundering cases. Clients are becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the services and they're expecting like better digital services. So the whole digitalization of this industry has been pushed and pulled from different angles. So I think the reason why the financial sector industry were maybe faster than the logistics, transportation industry, manufacturing at exploring this technology is basically that they needed to. So I think going back to your industry, I think we are seeing some really interesting cases. I just don't think that the urgency is there as much, so that it's maybe happening a little bit slower and there's time to kind of experiment. And another factor as well is that your industry is a little bit more analog at current stage. A lot of processes haven't been digitized yet. So I definitely think it will happen as the digitization happens, but it's not, you're not being forced into it with like 200 kilometers an hour, basically.
Yeah, right. And now you also mentioned with, digitalization, I think also for the transport industry in general and also the logistics industry, it's really a challenge for us also to become digital, many of our customers as well, especially when you are a smaller or a medium company. Is the blockchain also for smaller companies? I think what we have heard about are some of the bigger ones, not just in the road freight industry, but also in shipping, for example. But is it also for smaller or medium companies? Can they use the blockchain?
So it's a very valid question, of course, and I understand if you're a smaller company that you might not have as much money to experiment with, and that's totally understandable. I think one thing that is an important benefit of blockchain is the peer-to-peer nature of it. So there's actually a potential of sharing costs, like both the cost of actually developing a platform, but also the cost of maintaining it and running it. So I think this actually provides a really good opportunity for small to medium-sized companies, because you can equally play with some of the bigger companies by taking part of this, and the cost of entry is lower if you do it with others. So definitely, it's not a tomorrow you can just join this platform and everything is working, but you see these initiatives where companies go together and they're working on consortia play blockchains where they're trying to agree on some industry standards and they're doing something, and you also see companies experimenting on their own or with a few players.
Okay, I see. And also now you've mentioned collaboration, that you can share the cost, that you can collaborate with other peers, other colleagues, so to speak, in the industry. I think also with the logistics industry and also the transport industry, it is a very competitive sector. So I think maybe trust is also one of the bigger issues when you have blockchain technology. What are your thoughts in that direction? Because I think to share all of your information as one logistics company with maybe your competitor, I think that's a big challenge to overcome and to work together. What are your thoughts about that? Are there any use cases?
Definitely. So I think, first of all, it's a common misconception that because you're using a blockchain, you have to put all of your confidential business information on the blockchain. That's definitely not the case. The blockchain should be seen as it's a ledger, it's a record of transactions, and you can put different kind of information on it, and there are also different kind of blockchains. So there are some blockchains where all information will be available to everyone, and there are also blockchains where you can work with different kind of levels of permission, saying I only want to send this information to this person, and so forth. And then also you can also encrypt data, so you don't have to give away all your secrets to use blockchain. But I think one thing that blockchain actually does is provide this level of trust, because due to the peer-to-peer nature of the blockchain, you can hold each other accountable through the blockchain. So another interesting feature, I don't want to get too technical, but it's something that we call zero knowledge proof, and it's basically you can ask for something on a blockchain without revealing the full information. So for example, let's say I want to ensure that a certain kind of thing is being kept. So let's say we agree that I'm shipping a container and it has to be kept at between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. You don't have to reveal to me if it's at 14 degrees or 13 degrees. If you don't want to, I can instead use zero knowledge proof to ask you, was the container held between 10 and 15 Celsius? Yes and no. So in many ways it offers a better way of secrecy and accountability of each other.
Okay. And when you're also talking about, depending on, maybe some kind of a measurement within a trailer of the temperature, but then when you're talking about people entering information and again, a bit of the trustworthy concept, how does that work? Because the whole blockchain is then also, as I understand it, based on the truthfulness of the peers using it, of the people using it. So for example, if I would be to enter, I'm only 20 today, even
you
though
look
I'm
20.
not. Yeah, even though I'm not. And would people then be able to, to some way, read that I'm not?
First of all, it really depends on what kind of blockchain we're talking and how the infrastructure is set up. But a blockchain is only as strong as the data you put into it. So obviously, if you're putting a bunch of useless information in a blockchain, it's not going to get any stronger by putting it on a blockchain. But there are certain kind of attributes of the blockchain that makes it easier to verify when somebody's putting in information that they shouldn't be allowed to enter into the blockchain. So of course, blockchain is not a technology you should see in isolation. When we're talking about the container between 10 and 15 degrees, you're obviously also going to use some other kind of technology to ensure that it's within that range. It could be sensors or could also use machine learning or artificial intelligence to ensure that some of these processes are part of blockchain.
Yeah, okay. And also now you're mentioning also again with the temperature, and it's a machine kind of telling us some info from the beginning. But what if you start a blockchain where it's all about the people, the contact data from people? How do you start? Because in the beginning there's nothing. How would one start?
As with anything, when you're creating new IT infrastructure, you have to start somewhere. I'd say what we normally do is that we would first develop a concept of what we want to do, develop some hypothesis that we'd like to test. It could be around, by doing this we would save cost, or we would have less errors, or it could be that we give better customer satisfaction through transparency, or we give the customers a better onboarding experience. It could be something that is the value that we would like to get out of a blockchain, and often it's more than one. So, and then second, what we do is that we have this concept, we have this hypothesis, and then we would usually develop a pilot of some sort or proof of concept to test that this is actually true and we are getting those kind of benefits. And then once we reach this efficient outcome, we would take that into production and made it like a production grade and software. And of course there are some processes, like if it's currently analog data, that needs to be digitized, but if it's currently digitized, we can work with different kind of APIs that can integrate this data into the blockchain.
Okay, thank you for your answer, very interesting. Dear viewers, if you have any questions, please feel free also to ask via the comments via Facebook. Otherwise, I, of course, Sidsel, have a lot more questions. One of the other industries, now we talked a lot about transport industry, logistics, temperature controlled. It's kind of also, well, in that sense, also the same industry. But what about the trade and manufacturing and supply chain? There, I know there are more use cases, and is it, in your opinion, a bit more matured with the blockchain in that industries or those industries?
There are definitely lots of supply chain experiments or cases out there, and there's actually also different kind of projects in production within the supply chain space. I think what makes the supply chain space interesting is that we can all relate to it, and often there's some kind of physical product that we can see and feel, and that's an interesting for a consumer perspective. We've seen blockchain being used for tuna, for example, like high-grade sushi. In China, they're using it increasingly, and even in some supermarket for expensive food or products. We've seen it with formula for babies. That's also an area that's been very fraudulent. Various companies have experimented with expensive wine and liquors because there's lots of fraud in this industry, and it's really hard to tell as a consumer if a wine is really the wine that it should be. So tons of those examples, like of things that are more like high value, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. I see we also have a question from Alan. Thank you, Alan, for your question. Yeah, it's for you, Sidsel. Would you say that blockchain is only a hype?
Hi, Alan. Thank you for your question. It's not the first time I've gotten this question, but I appreciate it anyway. I'd say no, definitely no. I think a good example is you should really compare blockchain to the internet back in 1994. So if you go to YouTube and write internet 1994, you will find ridiculous comments about the internet. People saying like, we don't need it, we have a phone, we have a radio, like it's hilarious. That's how I think that we're gonna reach that same thing with blockchain at some point, because it's definitely not a hype. We are seeing real world applicable examples of blockchain, and it's just a matter of time.
Right, thank you, Alan, for your question. Sidsel, I have more questions for you on my sheet as well. So now we've spoken, it's not a hype. It's useful in transport logistics, it's useful within the supply chain for trade and manufacturing. But I mean, we've talked a bit about it, but more challenges for the blockchain. I mean, it's not all harmony and peaceful, so to speak. What are exactly the challenges or maybe the barriers for the blockchain? Maybe the biggest ones, maybe top 3?
Yeah. I think for a sec. I think the biggest barrier is like with any kind of technology implementation, like it's not just something that happens overnight. With blockchain, there's probably intensified barriers through a large number of stakeholders. Like where blockchain really makes sense is where you have multiple stakeholders, not just one company doing something, because there might be technologies that are better suited at that. So I think there's kind of 2 ways that you can go about these projects that involves lots of stakeholders. You can be a few people that decide to just move forward with something and create a technology. Maersk and IBM has done that with their TradeLens project. Right. So basically, it's a joint venture. They're owning the platform, and then other companies can pay to use their platform once it's done. That's probably it both have its advantages and disadvantages. The other approach that you can do is to get together a large number of people. You can set industry standards. You can agree on the approach, and then you can move forward and design something together that you all own. There's no like right and wrong, and time will tell which one is the most fruitful approach. But you can probably move faster if you have fewer players. But you can also risk creating something that others don't want to be a part of or feel excluded from.
Right.
Basically.
But now you're also saying, getting people to agree. Is that also, I can imagine that would be one of the biggest challenges. I mean, and not just in blockchain in general, getting people to all agree on one thing. Are some people also, I think, or at least the sense of the blockchain is also that you are together than making the rules. What do you think about this? Have you experienced how is it working when people have to agree on a, so to speak, goal or the rules for a blockchain?
I mean, any kind of meeting where you're tons of people, it really depends, and also the alignment of your goals. Like if you're all very aligned in an industry and you all kind of want to achieve the same thing, it's easier than if you're kind of like fighting already getting into the room. But I think it's just like trying to agree with anything. Basically, it's the people, and then after that, it's the technology. If you go do the consortia approach. I don't think I have a better answer than that to this, because it depends on the people.
That was a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see we have another question from a Michael. Thank you, Michael, for your question. So it says here, people are afraid of losing their jobs because of blockchain. What do you think about it, Sidsel?
Well, we're always seeing a technological evolution in jobs. So, I mean, like, we always get different jobs throughout history. Like, I think a really interesting example, in around 1900, there was a job where you would knock on people's window to wake them up in the morning for work because people didn't have alarm clocks. So I just think it's really hard for us to imagine what the future looks like and what kind of jobs people are going to be working in the future. And we will definitely lose some jobs due to technology and AI, but it's about finding those new, more interesting jobs and being in that field. And then I guess a part of it is too, like, who says we all have to work 40 hours a week in the future? We might have enough prosperity to work less. Who knows?
Yeah, or maybe in Scandinavia where they're already not working 40 hours, more like 37 in Denmark, for example. Sidsel, I also have another question. Now we're talking a bit also about jobs, about culture, but also about country. Yeah, the blockchain, I've seen it a lot used with American or US companies, not so much also in Europe. Do you think it has something to do with the social, the cultural differences, or the approach to things, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't think it's inherently American. I have seen some really interesting projects in Europe, and there's definitely a willingness to experiment with the technology. For example, in Deloitte, we've been working with the certificate provider DNVGL. Okay. They're based in Norway. They actually have been running their certificates on a blockchain for more than 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Norway is an example of this. The Port of Rotterdam just completed a pilot where they sought to do container freight on the blockchain, where financing, and it was completely paperless, and you could track the shipping as well.
Okay.
They're moving into that as well.
So there are use cases, European use cases.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, still in developing. It's still in coming, as you're mentioning. I also have completely another question. It's more because now you mentioned blockchain, think platform, blockchain versus platform. What are your thoughts about this?
So as I mentioned a bit earlier, I think you should perceive blockchain as a platform. It's a platform technology in itself. So I don't think there is a blockchain or platform paradigm. As I see it, blockchain is an underpinning technology that can enhance platforms. And of course, blockchains like the Bitcoin or the Ethereum network that are public and open, they do provide the promise of cutting out intermediaries, and that's of course a threat to some kind of platforms. But I also see like companies that have an existing platform can maybe optimize that and provide better services to their customers, whether it's B2B or B2C, by leveraging this technology to drive down cost or provide a better service or more transparency to their customers.
So it's also about not one technology or the other one, it's about connecting everything and, well, to some extent, the platforms being in the middle.
Definitely, and again, I would like to stress is where blockchain is really exciting is not blockchain used alone. It's where you use it with other technologies, and it's where you use it with like common sense. Like you should never use blockchain just to use blockchain. You should use blockchain where it makes sense.
That's a good one. So also, instead of saying a game changer, it's a game-changing team, so to speak.
I think it's a game-changing, enabling technology. So it's more about restructuring and designing new business models with this technology.
Great. Thank you very much. So, dear Sidsel, again, thank you very much for coming. I have one question last for you. We have had the live talk now, and to all out there who are still with doubt about the benefits about the blockchain, a few last words of convincement.
Yeah, definitely. I think 2 points that I've already drawn, I'd like to kind of go back to both of them. One of them is that like it's really hard for us humans to predict the future, and especially from a technological standpoint. Like who would have known in 1900 that we would not have people waking us up in the morning, that would actually have a phone that rings us up. So I think one thing is that the speed of change is that it can be really hard as a human to understand how fast it's going, and I think it's important to at least be open-minded and educate yourself, so you're not one day just wake up and you're like years behind. And I think the other part of it as well is that, like, again, blockchain is in its infancy. I'm not saying that blockchain is at the level of the apps that we have on our iPhone right now. We're very much in the early 90s, 94, 95 in terms of if you compare it to the internet. So have align your expectations to that as well. I think we'll see some really cool things, and you don't want to be that person that people play an audio or video clip of you laughing about blockchain in 2018, 19, 2020, who knows? That's
true. So stay open, stay curious. Sidsel, thank you very much for participating. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. It has been very, very interesting. I'm very sure we're going to see a lot more of you in the future. You have like 1,000 projects on the line. Should anybody want to stay in touch or just maybe pop Sidsel an email, her email is sidsel@løschenkohl.dk. And she's also on LinkedIn, of course, so you're welcome also to contact her there should you have interest. Sidsel, viewers, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. And until next time, until the next live talk, see you then. Bye.